In today's television and movie landscapes, adaptations are extremely common. Original properties are always being adapted and reworked, faithfully or not, into more digestible media for the masses. For the longest time, books to film was the most common form of adaptation, but for the last few decades, comic books have taken over as the prime source of adaptation. Today I'm not going to talk about DC or Marvel, the two juggernauts that encompass all comic book media. I'll be discussing a property that many don't even know originated from a comic book, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The Turtles are an interesting property that is constantly evolving. It is one of those franchises that gets rebooted about every decade or so, and so every generation since the property's inception has had their version of the Turtles. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles first released on the page back in 1984 by co-creators Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. Initially an underground comic that parodied elements of Daredevil and Bruce Lee kung fu movies of the 70s, it quickly found footing among adults and children alike and became one of the most popular franchises in the world. The first adaptation that came from the comic was the 1987 cartoon series produced by Fred Wolf Films. This cartoon series started off as a 5-episode miniseries that was meant to garner child interest for toys, but quickly was renewed for more seasons after the show became extremely popular. The 1987 show began to make changes to the original story and look of the Turtles. For one, the Turtles all wore different colored bandanas as opposed to all red bandanas, their personalities became more extreme, and they all wore initialed belt buckles to further make it easier to tell them apart. The Turtles' master and mentor, Splinter, went from a rat who learned kung fu and mutated, to a master sensei who was mutated into a rat. The Turtles' good friend from the comics, April O'Neil, went from an antique collector to a bright yellow jumpsuit news reporter. Other more colorful and wacky characters were added for comic relief, and the tone of the show was very silly and unserious. The semi-structured story of those first few episodes quickly became a thing of the past, as the series favored a more episode-of-the-week approach in its writing over time. This approach was common, as at the time shows like He-Man, Masters of the Universe, and Thundercats had initial seasons that were more story-oriented and character-driven. They then slowly became more loose with the writing, with more outrageous stakes and new characters being added to ensure drama. During the early 90s, the Turtles were at their height. The cartoon was exploding in popularity, the toy sales were through the roof, and the first feature film was released to great success. The film was admired by fans of the original comic as it closely followed multiple issues in the comic's run. This film was interesting in how it adapted the source material, however. It tried to stay true to the story and its characters, while also adding in some elements of the cartoon as well. All the Turtles in the film had colored headbands, and while an original character like April O'Neil was given back her antique collector background, she was also a news reporter in this iteration. The film utilized some of the comic's more violent set pieces, directly adapting the plot from the Leonardo one-shot comic, in which a single turtle is ambushed by the Foot Clan and the other turtles and their allies are forced to leave New York City. As the decade went on, the cartoon began to lose popularity, and the two sequels to the original 1990 film were progressively more silly and less grounded. This was an attempt to appease upset parents who deemed the original movie too violent and too mature for their children. The 90s came to an end, the fourth film was cancelled, and so was the cartoon, and the Turtles property became dormant. In 2003, a new cartoon was released. This time it was guided by original co-creator Peter Laird and was made for the purpose of revitalizing the property, and had a goal of adapting those original stories more closely in a serialized manner.
The inspiration for the new series really did come from the comics that Kevin Eastman and I did years ago. And the new show really does reflect the way we used to draw them in the comics and still draw them in the new comics. They're agile, they're muscular, they have a harder edge, you know, they look like they can kick butt as ninjas. And one of the things I'm really happy about in the new show is that we have done the classic comic book stylization of the eyes behind the bandanas. They're just white slits, which is the way we always drew them in the comics when they had their bandanas on. And I think it gives them a real kind of edgy, grim look when necessary.
Some episodes of the 2003 series are directly adapted, such as Season 1, Episode 16's The King, which is adapted from Donatello No. 1, in which Donatello discovers an artist with a magic pencil in April's basement. who are then both teleported to an alternate dimension that house all of the artist's creations. Season 4, Episode 4's Sons of the Silent Age is adapted from issue 28, Sons of the Silent Age, in which there are a species of merpeople that are discovered living in a river and whose population is threatened by a sewage plant nearby. The 2003 series represented a shift in the property as it tried to distance itself from a more campy and goofy children's cartoon to something more mature that could tell real stories about loss, revenge, depression, and heartbreak. As the series went on and its popularity began to wane, there were more fantastical elements added, and the show slowly lost its edge. Soon the show was to come to an end, as its predecessor once did, but to celebrate the Turtles' 35th anniversary, an animated TV film was produced. Turtles Forever would be the final project produced by Mirage Studios, the original company owner of the Turtles, as they would soon be sold to Viacom/Paramount. This movie represented the most popular iterations of the Turtles to that point. The 2003 Turtles, the 1987 Turtles, and even the original comic Turtles from 1984 were featured. In Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse fashion, different variants of the same characters go on an interdimensional adventure in order to stop a multiverse-ending threat. The look and sounds of the original cartoon are replicated to a T, no pun intended, referencing some of the original animation cells and environments in order to bring authenticity to that 80s world. This adventure as a whole leads to highlighting differences between the series' 2003 adaptation and the more goofy 1987 adaptation. There is even some comic relief in the third act between the both cartoon adaptations and the original comic Turtles, the comic Turtles deeming the both cartoon adaptations way too silly while they themselves are way too serious.
So if our Shredder destroys Turtle Prime, he'll end up wiping out all life everywhere.
So you're supposed to be us from other worlds. I don't see it.
What's with the multicolored headbands?
Sellouts. Well, check out the initialized belt buckles on these yahoos.
Hey!
How lame can a turtle get? Am I right? Hey! Ow! Jeez, what a hard case. What?
Nothing.
The film serves as a love letter to the fans who have stuck with the franchise and been audience to the different versions of these beloved characters. More Turtle media was to come after the property was acquired by Paramount. 2 shows have been produced by Nickelodeon, and 3 movies have been released since then. The Turtles have seen so much change through its run. It has stood the test of time and still goes strong as a property that people follow. There is often discussion on adaptation as a whole. How much needs to remain faithful in order to capture what was loved in the first place? How much do you need to change in order to gain a new audience? As shown with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, not even under the original company owners is there one definitive answer to those questions. Thank you for watching.